You can learn a lot about a person by playing tennis with them. As a rule, I've noticed that guys who act like gentlemen on the tennis court behave the same way in life. Conversely, I saw one guy demonstrate the worst sports skills I've ever seen while playing with his best friend. Later, I wasn't surprised when that guy abandoned his family and ran off with another man's wife. Then there's Frank Calhoun. Frank is a big guy who played soccer at Georgia Tech until he injured his knee. After an orthopedist fixed him up, Frank switched to tennis, but he plays tennis like a soccer player. Powerful serves and backhand shots, but I can beat him. I like to come up to the net and pressure him into hitting past me. Most of the time, he overdoes it and the ball bounces off the backhand line. And don't get me started on his serves. Let's just say that when he chooses a line, he always prefers it to be in his favor. As a result, Frank always wants to play me. He just can't lose to the little guy. I'm not little, I'm 6 feet tall. But I'm pretty skinny and wiry, which makes me small compared to Frank, who is 3 inches taller and 75 pounds heavier than me. Not surprisingly, I don't really want to play with Frank, but it's hard to avoid since we both live in the Eden Point neighborhood north of Atlanta. Since Atlanta is a big tennis town, our neighborhood was built around a club with a pool and lots of tennis courts. With so many people playing in the Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association leagues, it's pretty hard to avoid someone like Frank. But the good news is that I play with a lot of really nice people, such as my mixed doubles partner, Penny Pennington. I met Penny through my wife, Melanie. Melanie is a Pilates instructor, and many Eden Point residents attend her studio, including Penny. Unfortunately for me, Melanie isn't into tennis, but when she found out Penny was looking for a partner, she introduced us. And Penny and I have been playing together for about a year now. The club where we played today is in Stone Mountain, so I offered to give Penny a ride to save on gas. Considering how traffic builds up on Saturday afternoons, we figured the drive would take 45 minutes. As she pulled out of the driveway, I wondered once again why Penny was still single. Part of the reason was that she had lost her husband in a car accident 3 years ago. After a long period of mourning, one of the ways she coped with her grief was to attend Melanie's Pilates classes. Another way was to return to tennis, which she had played in school. All this exercise had resulted in a slim-toned, dark-haired woman in her 30s. I expected a beautiful woman like Penny to attract admirers like flies to honey, but she always told Melanie that she just hadn't found the right man. "Hi, Penny," I said when she opened the door of my car. "Are you ready to pick them up today?" She smiled. "I'm ready, Michael. I've been wanting to get back at those guys for a long time." We discussed our strategy for the match as I pulled onto I-285, but I was interrupted by a cell phone call. "Hi, Robert. You've got to be kidding me. No, everything's fine here." "Damn. Okay, let's move it to another day." Penny looked at me in confusion as I turned onto the next exit and headed home. "That was our opponent," I explained to her. "He said it just rained, and the courts are unplayable." Atlanta is known for sudden downpours that can flood one part of the city while the sun is shining brightly just a few miles away. Penny was clearly disappointed. "Damn, I really wanted to play tonight." "Listen," I said, "let's go back to the club. We can practice. Maybe someone will want to play." As we approached the main entrance to Eden Point, I turned onto the road leading to my house. "I just want to stop by and pick up the check for this quarter's club dues," I told Penny. "I won't be long." I parked at the curb and hurried to the front door. I had written the check last night and left it on the dresser so I knew where to find it. But as I walked down the hall, I heard noises coming from the master bedroom, noises I shouldn't have heard. It was Melanie's voice. What the hell? I tiptoed down the hallway and peeked through the door. Melanie was lying with a man. I felt like I'd been in an accident. I was stunned, unable to move, unable to think. Everything suddenly changed, and I couldn't understand what was happening. "No, this can't be," I thought, recognizing Frank Calhoun's figure. I jumped back from the door as if I had been punched. It was unbearable. My first impulse was to burst into the room and attack him. But what good would that do? I asked myself in despair. They've already tricked me, and fighting him won't change anything. Besides, even if I manage to land the first blow, he's so much bigger than me that he'll beat me half to death anyway. But I don't want him to get away with it. Standing frozen in place, I suddenly remembered that Penny was waiting for me in the car. Damn, I have to take her home first and then come back here and talk to them, I thought. In a daze, I walked down the hallway and out of the house. I felt nauseous. I looked up and saw Penny staring at me from the car window. A moment later, I got behind the wheel and started the engine. I don't know what I looked like, but it wasn't good. "Are you okay, Michael?" Penny asked, looking at me with concern. I couldn't speak. I gripped the steering wheel as tightly as I could and drove to Penny's house. When I pulled up, I put the car in park and, without looking at her, said, "I'm sorry, Penny, but I can't go with you today." "What's wrong, Michael? What's wrong?" she asked with growing anxiety. When I didn't answer, she leaned over, turned off the ignition, took the keys, got out of the car and walked over to my door. I turned to her. "I have to go, Penny. Please give me back the keys." "No," she said firmly. "I won't give them back until you tell me what's wrong." When I didn't say anything, she opened the car door and pulled me by the arm. "You're not going anywhere until you come inside and tell me what's going on." Like a robot, I got out of the car and let her lead me into the house. She disappeared for a moment and returned with a glass of ice water. I absent-mindedly took a sip while she watched me. When I put the glass down, she took my hand and squeezed it in hers. "Tell me, Michael, what happened?" Suddenly, all my resistance collapsed, and I leaned back against the sofa. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened again, and I took another sip of water. "It was Melanie and Frank," I said tensely. She looked at me, confused. "Go on," she said. "They were there together, in our bedroom. They were," I whispered. She sighed. "No, that can't be true. Melanie would never do that." The image of the two of them came back to me with renewed force, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek. "I never thought she was capable of that either," I croaked, feeling the pain in my throat intensify. "Maybe it was something else, Michael? Maybe you were wrong," she asked. I knew she was trying to help, but it didn't stop the anger building inside me. When I looked in there, they were having fun. "So tell me, Penny, was I wrong?" She flinched at my angry sarcasm. "I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't doubt you. I just hoped there was some other explanation." A new wave of pain shot through me. "What about Frank Calhoun?" I said angrily. "How could she let that huge monkey get to her?" "I guess that explains why Frank started going to Melanie's Pilates class," Penny mused. "He went to her class?" I exclaimed. "She never told me that." My anger was still boiling. "Thanks for letting me know," I said bitterly. Now Penny was hurt. "That's not fair, Michael. I didn't know there was anything between them." "I'm sorry, Penny," I said. "I didn't mean to lash out at you. It's just really hard for me right now." She squeezed my hand. "It's okay, Michael. I can only imagine how you must be feeling right now." I stood up. "I have to go," I told her. "I have to go back there and find out what's really going on." "You're not going to do anything violent, Michael?" "No, I just need some answers." She squeezed my hand. "Please tell me what's going on, Michael, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help." I thanked her and got back in my car. On the way home, I thought with dread about what awaited me. I thought about all the questions I wanted to ask her and tried to anticipate her possible reactions. I expected tears, denial, and angry words. How would I respond? What about Frank? What if he was still there? I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my veins. When I entered the kitchen, Melanie must have heard me because she came out to meet me. She was wearing a bathrobe and her hair was wrapped in a towel. "You're back early," she said cheerfully. "How was the game?" "We got caught in the rain," I replied in a broken voice. "Oh, I'm sorry you couldn't play," she said. Penny must be upset. I just stared at her. I didn't feel like making small talk. "They announced the rain right after we left," I said quietly. She blinked, but her expression didn't change. "I went home," I told her. My heart was beating faster. "I saw you with Frank." Of all the scenarios I had played out in my head, Melanie's reaction was not what I had expected. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said evenly. "That's all you can say?" I asked incredulously. "You're cheating on me and you're sorry I saw it? You won't even apologize for having fun with him? How long has this been going on? Don't you have any explanation?" She crossed her arms and sighed. "Sit down, Michael," she said, pointing to the dining room table. "I'd rather stand," I said angrily. "As you wish," she replied, and sat back down in her chair. I stood there, stunned by her complete lack of reaction. "Listen, Michael, we were going to tell you about this soon anyway, but I guess this just moves it up a little. I'm leaving you. Frank and I love each other, and I'm going to move in with him. We're getting married as soon as the divorce is final." I decided to dodge the blow rather than risk falling. Without letting me say a word, she jumped up and said, "Wait here," and disappeared into our bedroom. A few minutes later, she returned, clutching a stack of papers in her hands. She handed them to me across the table. This isn't sarcasm, she said. I don't even want alimony from you. I took all the money out of our account, but that's fair because I'm leaving you the house. It's much more than you'd get in court, but I don't mind if you sign the papers and let us move on. I looked at the stack of papers. It was a divorce petition. Have you been to a lawyer? I asked in amazement. What about our marriage? What about the last 10 years we've spent together? I'm so sorry, Michael. I didn't plan this. It just happened. Just accept it. What you see is what you get. Accept, I shouted. Accept that my loving wife has been having an affair with that jerk Frank Calhoun in our own bed? Accept that our marriage is over? She stood up. I'm disappointed, Michael. I was hoping for a more mature response from you. She turned and walked back into the bedroom. I sat at the table staring at the divorce papers in front of me, trying to make sense of what was happening. If someone had asked me that morning, I would have said that I loved my wife and that we had a good marriage. And now, this afternoon, I had learned that she was leaving me for another man. Talk about cognitive dissonance. In the silence, I heard cell phones ringing, then snatches of conversation. He saw us, just as we expected. That's good. When she returned, she was fully dressed and carrying a bag with her things for the night and a makeup bag. Now that you mention it, I'm not staying here tonight. Frank will pick me up. We'll come back on Monday when you're at work and get the rest of our things. So you're leaving, just like that? It has to be, she said. Okay, I replied bitterly. Oh, what should I tell our friends? She sighed. Listen, Michael, Frank and I haven't done anything wrong, and we're not going to hide like criminals. We're going to continue to be active members of the community. In fact, we're probably going to a reception at Eden Point tomorrow night. You don't need to tell anyone because everyone already knows. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Melanie looked out the window. Frank's here, she said. I have to go. Closing the door, she leaned toward me again and looked at me. Just sign the papers, Michael. The sooner you do it, the better it will be for all of us. Then she left. I don't know how long I sat there. Emotions raged inside me like train cars rushing through a crossroads. One minute I was boiling with rage, the next I was reminiscing about happy moments, and the next I was sad. I told myself that I treated her like a queen, and then I wondered what I had done to push her away. I'm better off without her, I repeated, until loneliness enveloped me. The ring of my cell phone made me jump and I answered quickly. Subconsciously, I hoped to hear Melanie's voice, but it was Penny. What's wrong, Michael? She asked. Not good, I replied. She left me. I heard, she said. You heard? I asked, surprised. Where? How? I'm so sorry, Michael, she said sadly. Frank bragged about it at the club. Oh, shit, I thought. It's already started. On Sunday, I called the captain of our men's team. I didn't want to go out on the field. I'm sorry, Joe, I told him. You'll have to take me off the roster today. I have personal matters to attend to. Yeah, I heard, he said sympathetically. I'm sorry, good luck? I thanked him, but I knew I'd have another chance. I spent the rest of the day at home. I was probably hiding, although I hated to admit it. Sports were on TV, but I didn't watch. My thoughts kept returning to my marriage to Melanie. Why had it all gone wrong? When did she stop loving me? I was sure she was in love with me when she married me right after college. We hadn't been apart for the entire last year of school. I proposed to her during Christmas break. She was studying physical education and health, and every time the guys from my fraternity saw her in her gym clothes, they teased me. She had a combination of grace, fitness, and sex appeal that was almost impossible to resist. I surrendered as soon as I met her. We settled into family life easily. I found a great job in Atlanta, and she got a job as an aerobics instructor. After a few years, we saved enough money for a down payment on a house and found what we were looking for in a new residential complex called Eden Point. I felt that here in Eden Point, we were truly happy. I received several promotions at work, and Melanie decided to start her own business. By that time, we had enough money to rent a space for her studio in one of the small shopping centers in the area. And things were going very well for her. Our savings were growing. We had made many friends and acquaintances, especially in Eden Point. And we even started talking about starting a family in a year or two. Our sex life had calmed down a bit, but that didn't surprise me. Work took up all my time, and daily Pilates classes would wear anyone out. Looking back on it all, I began to realize that our relationship had really slowed down over the past 6 months, although I hadn't noticed it at the time. I also remembered that Melanie sometimes seemed a little distracted, as if she were in another world. But when we made love, I felt better than ever and thought Melanie felt the same way. Obviously, I was wrong. I mentally berated myself. How could I have been so blind that I didn't notice she had another man? How could I not have realized that she had fallen out of love with me and fallen in love with Frank Calhoun? The only thing I could assume was that when you love and trust someone, you don't look for signs of betrayal and deception. No, I thought sarcastically. You just have to wait until they hit you over the head. On Monday, I arrived at work early to get everything done. Around 9, I called my lawyer's office and tried to set up a meeting. When the secretary asked why I was calling, I didn't want to bring up Melanie and me, so I said I needed to make some changes to my will. When she came back on the line, she said she could meet with me right after lunch. When I arrived at his office, Jonathan met me in the lobby. We had been classmates in college, and I had turned to him when Melanie and I decided to make wills. When we settled into his office, he looked at me with concern. "Everything okay, Michael? I understand you need to make some changes to your will. You or Melanie aren't ill, are you?" "Thanks for asking, Jonathan, but it's nothing serious," I replied. I then handed him the documents Melanie had given me on Saturday. After reading them, he shook his head. When he finished, he looked at me. "I'm very sorry, Michael. Do you think there's any chance of reconciliation?" "I don't think so. She's already moved out of our house and in with her boyfriend. She told me they plan to get married as soon as our divorce is finalized." He shook his head. "I didn't expect that. You seemed like the perfect couple." Then his expression changed, and his voice took on a professional tone. "Given the circumstances, as your legal advisor, I advise you to sign this agreement immediately." "Just like that? 10 years of marriage down the drain?" I asked bitterly. He shook his head patiently. "In cases like this, Michael, you have to stop thinking with your heart and start thinking with your head. I believe Melanie has made you a very generous offer, much better than what you would get if you decided to fight for her. She may be partly motivated by guilt, but I'm willing to bet that the main reason is to give you an incentive to agree as soon as possible so she can marry her new man. Although it may seem like you're giving in to her now, the truth is that if your marriage falls apart, it's the best thing you can hope for." I knew he was right. Hell, after everything she'd done, I didn't want to stay married to her anyway. But I still felt like she and Frank had beaten me at a game I didn't even know I was playing. Jonathan spoke again in a sympathetic tone. "Listen, Michael, I know the lawyer Melanie hired. If you sign, we can file this divorce agreement in court very quickly. It will include everything she offered you. Then, if she has a change of heart and wants to come back, and you're willing to take her back, you'll have 30 days to withdraw the divorce." I knew that wouldn't happen. "Can I borrow a pen?" I asked. When I got back to the office, I headed straight to Human Resources. I had a lot of changes to make to my health insurance, 401k retirement plan, and a number of other spousal benefits. The employee who helped me must have done this a lot because he quickly prepared all the necessary forms. As I signed them, I looked up and saw him looking at me. "Looks like I won't have to make an announcement at the office after all," I thought ironically. On my way home that evening, I stopped at a restaurant in the neighborhood and bought dinner. But when I got home, I found that Melanie had been there during the day and had packed everything she wanted. Of course, all her cosmetics were gone, but I was surprised to find a few things she had left behind. However, upon closer inspection, I realized that these were things she no longer wore. "I guess I'll have to take them to a charity shop," I thought gloomily. Further investigation revealed that the bedroom wasn't the only place she had searched. Our good china was gone, as was most of the silverware we had received as a wedding gift. In the kitchen, I noticed that the dishes and a set of good meat knives had also been taken. Several pieces of furniture were missing, and when I went into the living room, I saw that most of our CD and DVD collection was also gone. Looking through our things, I noticed that she hadn't touched our wedding album. For some reason, this upset me more than all the things she had taken with her. It was as if she wanted to erase all memories of our life together. I went back to the kitchen and hid the food I had bought in the refrigerator. After her intrusion, I had no appetite. I decided I needed to change the locks. Damn, how can you go from being a happily married man to a lonely divorcee in 3 days? I asked myself. Asked myself. Asked myself. Asked myself. It all seemed so damn unfair. I spent the next week in complete isolation, leaving for work early every day and returning home late. The rest of the time I spent at home. The humiliation of Frank Calhoun stealing my wife was unbearable, and the fact that I couldn't do anything about it was almost unbearable. I admit I fantasized about attacking him with a baseball bat or brass knuckles. Sometimes I dreamed of hitmen and car explosions. But then I came back to reality. Did I really want to ruin my life to get back at a womanizer and a wife who couldn't keep her legs together? By Friday, I decided it was time to come out of my cocoon. I hadn't done anything wrong and had no reason to hide. I called Penny. "Hey, partner, aren't we supposed to play tennis this weekend?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful and optimistic. "Oh, Michael, I'm so glad to hear from you," she replied quickly. "I've wanted to call you so many times, but I figured you probably needed some time alone." "Thanks, Penny," I replied, softening my tone. "It's been a rough week." I told her everything that had happened, and then asked what had happened in Eden Point that I didn't know about. She paused for a few seconds before admitting that our situation was the talk of the neighborhood. "You'd think they'd have something better to talk about," I said sharply. "Maybe they would," Penny agreed. "But Frank and Melanie are going through a rough patch. They've been at the club every night since last Saturday. Frank is practically bragging about who he slept with, and Melanie is clinging to him like a lovesick schoolgirl." There was anger in her voice. "It's disgusting, Michael. I quit her Pilates class right away and told her I couldn't be her friend anymore," she said. Her loyalty comforted me a little. "What about the others, Penny? What are they saying?" I asked. "I think it's just as you suspected, Michael. There are those who are very unhappy with Frank and Melanie and try to have as little to do with the lovebirds as possible. And then there's the group that always hangs around Frank. They praise his virtues, if you know what I mean. But for most people, it's just a sad and awkward situation, and they try to stay away from it. Rationally, I knew that was how it would be, but part of me wanted society to tar and feather Frank and Melanie and run them out of town on a rail. But I was determined not to let my disappointment get in the way. "In any case, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in hiding," I told Penny. "We have a game scheduled for Saturday, and unless you mind, I intend to take the court with my partner," I told her. "I'm glad, Michael," she replied warmly. "You can count on me." I deliberately arrived at the tennis court a little later to avoid conversations on topics I didn't want to discuss. It didn't help. When I approached the tennis pavilion, I felt the eyes of my neighbors and teammates on me. I understood their curiosity, but I still didn't like the feeling. When she saw me, the captain of our mixed doubles team hurried over. "Michael, I'm so sorry. The other team changed their lineup at the last minute, and some matches have already started, so there's nothing I can do. If you don't want to play, I understand." "What are you talking about, Mary?" I asked. I don't understand." "It's about Frank," she said. "You and Penny have to play against Frank and his partner." Damn, I thought. That's the last thing I wanted to do. At that moment, Penny came over and, realizing what was happening, turned pale. She pulled me aside and whispered, "We shouldn't do this, Michael. It's not a big deal. We'll just lose and play someone else next week." "No," I said loudly enough for Penny to flinch. "I'm not going to hide from this bastard for the rest of my life. I have to look him in the eye, and I'd better start right now." Penny gave me a worried look, but I turned to Mary. "It's okay," I told her. "Penny and I are here to play." It was a real bloodbath. I played worse than I had in years, and my obvious emotions affected Penny as well. Frank, on the other hand, was in great form, and his powerful shots tore through the net like rockets. To make matters worse, he teased me constantly throughout the match. "Come on, Michael. You can hit harder," he shouted when I hit a weak shot that he easily returned. Another time he shouted, "Your wife hits harder." Oh, wait, I was wrong. You don't have a wife. I just exploded. To make matters worse, a crowd had gathered around our little match, and I looked up and saw Melanie standing by the fence. To her credit, she grumbled at some of Frank's comments, but she never once looked in my direction. At one point, I weakly served a second time, and Frank hit the ball straight at Penny. It bounced off her shoulder and nearly knocked her off her feet. I rushed toward the net with my racket in my hands, ready to decapitate the bastard. But Penny grabbed my arm and begged me not to follow him to the net. "It was a fair shot," she said. "I'm fine. I'm not hurt. It's just part of the game." I glared at him as he pretended to tie his shoelaces. Finally, I returned to my spot, filled with anger and disappointment. The final score was 6-2, 6-1, a humiliating defeat. Gritting my teeth, I walked over to the net to shake hands with our opponents. Frank's partner seemed embarrassed by his behavior and apologized, shaking my hand. Frank, however, simply walked over to us and without bothering to extend his hand said, "That was fun. Let's do it again when you feel like fooling around." Then he turned defiantly, walked over to Melanie, and kissed her firmly through the waist-high fence. I don't know what Penny read on my face, but she grabbed my arm and dragged me off the court. "He's trying to provoke you, Michael. He wants you to fight him. Don't let him get to you. Please, for my sake." I sat down on the podium and someone handed me a glass of ice water. I took a few sips and poured the rest over my head. I couldn't have felt worse than I did that day. I apologized to Penny for playing so badly and despite her protests, got in the car and drove home. Throwing my clothes in the laundry basket, I dragged myself into the shower and stood under the water for half an hour. When the water finally cooled down, I got out, dried myself off, and collapsed on the bed, angry and disgusted with myself. I knew why I had lost. I had let Frank get the better of me. This realization only made me feel worse. He had gotten to me, and he had gotten to Melanie, though obviously in a different way, but the result was the same, turning a loser like Frank into a big winner. I vowed to myself that I would no longer tolerate Frank's bullying, or Melanie's for that matter. I would find a way to break them both. I just had to figure out how. I lay on my bed and thought about what my old tennis coach had told me. Play to your opponent's weaknesses. It sounded good in theory, but how could I apply it to this situation? I know myself. Once I start working on a problem, my brain won't stop attacking it, even when I switch to other tasks. In fact, I've often found that if I leave a problem alone for a while, I can easily find a solution when I come back to it. That's what happened in this case. I thought about the problem, then put it aside, and spent most of Sunday finishing the housework I had started. By evening, I was so tired that I had no trouble falling asleep. When I got to work the next day, I realized I had a possible solution. It'll probably be expensive, I thought, but if it works, it'll be worth it. Mid-morning, I called one of our best salespeople. "Hey, Jerry," I said when I picked up the phone. "Do you want to have lunch with me today? My treat." "Sure, Michael, especially if you're paying." We met at a grill bar I knew. It was a little run down, but the food was great. After we ordered, Jerry looked at me. "Hey, Michael, I'm really sorry to hear about you and Melanie. I thought things were going well." "Yeah, me too, Jerry, me too. But that's why I wanted to talk to you." "Sure, Michael, I'd be happy to help in any way I can." "Okay, Jerry, here's my question. When you entertain your best clients, do you ever use the services of an escort agency?" He looked at me strangely. "No, Michael, of course not. It's against company policy, and I would never do that." I leaned across the table toward him. "Jerry, this isn't a company question, and we're not here on business. This is strictly personal, if you know what I mean." He looked at me for a few seconds, then a spark flashed in his eyes. "Oh, I see," he said. "I guess you've been in a rut for a while. Your wife left you. You don't go on dates or anything." He paused, then leaned toward me. "Of course, I know one of the best services in town. But listen, Michael, they only serve the biggest players, you know? Their girls are incredible, but I think they might be out of your league." I smiled at him. "I'll take care of that. Just tell me how to contact them and what to expect." And over a hamburger and beer, that's exactly what he did. After lunch, I nervously reread the notes I had taken during lunch. I hoped I was doing everything right. Then I remembered how Frank had teased me, how Melanie had announced she was leaving with a cold stare, and I decided to take action. I dialed the number Jerry had given me, and a pleasant male voice answered. "Hello, how can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to speak to Mr. Henry Miller," I said as if on cue. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice replied. "What are you looking for?" "Something from Grove Press," I replied. "Please give me your name, sir." I considered using a pseudonym, but Jerry had clearly hinted that I should use my real name. "They're always afraid of the police," he had told me. "They'll do anything to make sure you're not a cop trying to set them up." I gave him my real name. "Are you calling from your office?" Mr. Miller asked. "Yes," I replied. "But this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with my company." "I understand, sir." "Now, could you give me your office number?" "Sure," I said. "But don't you want my direct number?" "No," he replied. "I'll call the main number and ask for you, then we can sort this out." Quite clever, I thought to myself. If he calls and the operator answers, he'll realize he's calling a real company and not the police. And if she transfers his call to me, he'll realize I'm really an employee of the company. Of course, it wasn't a perfect plan, but it was quite acceptable. I gave him the number for the main switchboard, and he hung up immediately. A few minutes later, my phone rang and the operator transferred the call to me. It was Mr. Miller. He then asked for my cell phone number. This will allow us to contact you after hours if necessary, he explained. After I gave him my cell phone number, he continued. Now that we've gone through the identification process, tell me how we can help you. I'm looking for a very special companion who could be available for several assignments over the course of a month or more. Said the voice. That's a little unusual. We don't usually take on assignments for such a long period of time. We may be able to help you, but it will be expensive. He quoted a price that made my eyes water. I swallowed. That's fine, Mr. Miller. Okay, do you have any special requirements? Yes, I said, she has to look like a goddess. He smiled. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, sir. But I think you'll be able to find a companion to your liking. He paused. Do you have a pen? When I assured him I did, he gave me the address of their website. I noticed that the URL began with HTTPS, which meant secure server. When I entered it, to my surprise, I was told to enter Anais Nin as my username. I was then given a digital password. Please understand, sir, that your username and password will be changed after you make your selection. This is for your safety and ours. When I confirmed that I understood, he continued. Now about payment, sir. As soon as you make your selection and the session is scheduled, your credit card will be charged the amount you just agreed upon. In addition, our clients are expected to express their gratitude directly to our escorts. If you are satisfied with everything, we recommend leaving a tip of 25%. I quickly calculated in my head. This should work, I thought. Otherwise, I'll not only be broke, but also humiliated. Very good, sir. When you are ready to make your choice, please visit our website. There you can arrange all the other details. All the best, sir. After that, the connection was cut off. I waited until evening when I got home and went to the website Henry had given me. The main page simply said Capricorn Services with the tagline, "We satisfy the needs of the most discerning clients." Using the username and password Henry had given me, I logged in and was greeted by a window that could have been taken straight out of a Victoria's Secret catalog. All the women in the photos were so beautiful that I wondered why they weren't working as models instead of escort services. I even thought that these photos had been copied from some modeling website as part of a scam. But my friend Jerry insisted that Capricorn was a real company, so I decided to take a chance. I decided to choose a blonde, but then my attention was drawn to a photo of a woman with shoulder-length dark hair, and I impulsively clicked on Rhiannon. The confirmation that appeared on the screen assured me that Rhiannon would contact me within 24 hours to arrange a meeting. I was then asked to enter my credit card details. After verifying my card number and expiration date, the screen went black, and I was suddenly taken to another page. Out of curiosity, I tried to log back into Capricorn, but this time the welcome screen didn't recognize my username and password, and after a second attempt, I was kicked back to the home page. I was impressed by the security of their system and thought it was a promising sign. If they went to such lengths, then perhaps their services were as good as Jerry had claimed. I spent the entire next day on edge waiting for Rhiannon's call. At one point, I even considered backing out of the deal. My little plan would cost me a pretty penny, and there was no guarantee of success. But when I went into the break room to get a cup of coffee, the two secretaries who had been talking when I entered immediately fell silent and turned away from me. It didn't take a genius to figure out who they were talking about. The pain of being the subject of office gossip strengthened my resolve. Whatever happened, I wasn't going to remain a helpless victim if I could do something about it. It was after dinner when my cell phone rang, and when I answered, a melodious voice said, "Hi, Michael, this is Rhiannon. I'm looking forward to meeting you." I swallowed and replied, suggesting we meet for dinner to discuss my request. When she agreed, I suggested the same grill where Jerry and I had dinner. It was small, dark, and far enough from Eden Point that I was unlikely to run into any of my neighbors there. She laughed. "How interesting. I don't think I've ever had dinner there. I look forward to seeing you." With that, she hung up. Well, that's that, I thought. On this weekday evening, the grill bar wasn't crowded, which was one of the reasons I had chosen this place, and the subdued lighting also suited my purposes. But when she walked in, it was as if a spotlight had been turned on her. She saw me standing up nervously, walked over, and shook my hand confidently. "Hello, Michael," she said in her melodious voice. "It's very nice to meet you in person." She sat down, and I followed her. I must have been staring at her because she laughed and asked, "Well, how do I look?" We've all seen movie stars on the big screen or models in magazines. They're gorgeous, but they're not real. But now I had met one in person, and the impression was overwhelming. The young woman sitting across from me was simply stunning. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, full lips, hair framing her face, athletic but feminine figure. I could go on, but the fact remains, for several minutes, I just stared at her in silent amazement. She smiled and broke the silence. "I guess you like me," she said. "Oh, yes, I'm sorry," I stammered. My voice trailed off in embarrassment. Fortunately, at that moment, the waitress came over to take our order. I don't even remember what I ordered, but Rhiannon settled on a green salad with the dressing on the side. As the waitress wrote down her order, I realized she too had fallen under Rhiannon's spell. She kept glancing at her until she finally muttered, "Are you on TV?" Rhiannon smiled sweetly at her. "No, I'm afraid not," she replied. And the waitress walked away, muttering something under her breath. Their brief conversation allowed my rational brain to kick back in. I looked at Rhiannon curiously. "I bet this happens to you a lot." She nodded unconsciously. "Yes, very often." "Can I ask you something? Why don't you work in television or modeling instead of—" I asked, hesitating a little at the end. "I've thought about it," she admitted. "But it's a very cruel world. I may be good-looking, but I'm just one of many in this world. The chances of success are about the same as a basketball player making it to the NBA. But in this field, I stand out. And unlike models or actresses, I didn't have to starve for years to make a name for myself. From the very beginning in this business, I've earned as much money as possible. By the time my beauty starts to fade, I'll have saved enough money to live on those savings for the rest of my life. And if I'm really lucky, I'll find a rich man who wants a beautiful wife and doesn't care how she makes her living." I couldn't help but nod. I didn't approve of her career choice, but she approached the issue sensibly. At that moment, the waitress brought us our dinner. After placing the dishes in front of Rhiannon, she looked at her again and said, "Are you sure you're not in movies? I feel like I've seen you somewhere before." Rhiannon shook her head. I don't think so. If I had, I would have remembered." I tried to stifle a laugh as the waitress hurried away. When we started eating, she looked at me intently. "So, Michael, why don't you tell me what's on your mind? Henry said it was something unusual." I blushed and began to tell her my story. When I recounted my conversation with Melanie after I caught her in bed with Frank, Rhiannon gave me a sympathetic look. "That was pretty cruel," she said. When I told her about Frank Calhoun and how he had behaved, she nodded understandingly. "I've met a lot of people like him." She wiped her mouth and folded her hands on the table. "So what exactly do you want to do, and where do I fit into your plans?" For the next 15 minutes, I described what I hoped to accomplish over the next month. When I finished, I admitted that I had a lot of doubts about what I was trying to do. But I can't just sit back and let those two treat me badly without putting up a fight. And now that I've met you, I'm starting to think it might work. She smiled broadly. "What a nice compliment," she said. Then she leaned across the table. "You know what? I think I'd like that." "Great," I said enthusiastically and held out my hand to seal the deal. She laughed and shook my hand firmly. "To partners in crime," she said with a mischievous smile. Then she sat down and did something I didn't notice. "Well," she said in a low, pleasant voice, "now that we've taken care of the business part of our meeting, maybe we should move to a more comfortable place." My mouth suddenly went dry, and I had to take a sip of water before I could speak. "No," I said. "We just need to get to know each other better today." She smiled at me ironically. "You don't like me?" "Oh, God, no," I stammered. "I mean, yes, but that's not the point. I'm just trying to focus on what we're here to do, and I'd rather not get involved with you, you know? But I have something else for you." With that, I slid an envelope across the table to her. I had put several large bills in it earlier. She took it triumphantly and hid it in her purse. "I think I understand, Michael." She tilted her head slightly to look at me. "You're a very interesting man. I think I'm going to enjoy our little adventure." With that, she got up and left, and I remained sitting in the booth. For some reason, I felt drained. What a woman, I thought. We planned to begin Phase 1 of Operation Honey Trap on Saturday, right after lunch. The temperature in Atlanta had already risen, and I figured the pool at Eden Point would be packed. I was a little worried that Rhiannon wouldn't show up, but shortly after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled up to my house. She walked up to my door with a small bag and, when I raised my eyebrows, said, "My swimsuits." She looked around and smiled. "So this is the suburbs. Do you like it here?" I frowned. I did until recently. "We'll fix that," she replied. At the club, we split up to change into our swimsuits. As agreed, I went out first and found two lounge chairs next to a table with an umbrella. I had barely settled down when I noticed a large man, Frank Calhoun, heading toward me. "Well, Michael," he muttered, "I'm surprised to see you at the pool today. I thought you were taking lessons from a pro and trying to improve your tennis game." I knew he was trying to provoke me, but I answered him firmly. "No, my girlfriend and I are going to lie by the pool and sunbathe today." Frank wasn't going to let me off that easily. "Oh, you have a girlfriend now? I'd like to meet her." By this point, our conversation had attracted the attention of everyone within earshot. That worked to my advantage. "You're in luck, Frank. Here she is," I said, pointing to the women's locker room door. Oh, God. The club fell silent as Rhiannon approached us. She looked divine. She came up to me and said, "Good boy, sweetie." She purred, "You found a place for us." Then she turned to Frank. "Who's your friend, Michael?" I looked at Frank and to my delight saw that his mouth was open and he was frozen, staring at the beauty in front of him. "Rhiannon," I said. "Meet Frank." "Frank, this is my girlfriend, Rhiannon." He snapped his mouth shut and quickly extended his hand for a handshake. "Welcome to Eden Point," he said rather solemnly. "If there's anything I can do to help, don't hesitate to ask." Rhiannon smiled sweetly. "Oh, how nice." Turning to me, she asked affectionately, "Is everyone here as nice as Frank?" I replied sharply, "No, Frank is unique." She smiled at him again. "Thank you so much for helping me feel at home." When he remained standing there, she smiled and looked down. "You can let go of my hand." "Oh," he said, embarrassed. "Well, I have to go. I hope we see each other again, Rhiannon. I hope we meet again." With that, he turned awkwardly and walked back to the pool, looking back over his shoulder several times. I looked over and saw Melanie sitting with her arms crossed over her chest. She looked unhappy. Rhiannon and I settled into our lounge chairs. She took my hand and pulled me closer so I could whisper in her ear. "I think that went pretty well." I squeezed her hand. "You were magnificent," I assured her. She smiled and quickly kissed me on the lips. I know she did it in a friendly way, but even 15 minutes later I could still feel her lips. Then she stretched out on the deck chair face down. "Put some suntan lotion on me, will you, Michael?" When I happily complied, I thought I heard male moans nearby. Over the next few hours, I think everyone who was at the pool that day tried to walk past us to get a look at my new friend. I know for a fact that all my male colleagues stopped, exchanged a few joking words, and made sure to introduce them to Rhiannon. She was gracious to each of them and chatted with them as if they were old friends. At one point, I leaned over to her and whispered, "You should go into politics." She just smiled and winked at me. "In my profession, I'm already one step away from that," I laughed. When things calmed down, she leaned over to me again. "Who is she?" I knew exactly who she was talking about and pointed to Melanie at the other end of the pool. "Okay," she said, "leave that to me." She put on her high-heeled shoes and, clicking her heels, walked to the edge of the pool where Melanie was swimming. Leaning over, she took off her shoes and gracefully dove into the shallow water. When she surfaced, she tilted her head forward and then quickly threw it back, so that her hair formed a graceful arc above her head, spraying water into the air like a fan. I was completely mesmerized. I had seen this trick before in commercials, but never in real life. It was stunning. Then Rhiannon glided out of the water and onto the deck. Standing facing Melanie, with water dripping down her body, she tossed her hair back, emphasizing her breasts. Then she put on her shoes, which added 10 centimeters to her height, and walked over to me. I reluctantly looked away from Rhiannon to Melanie. She glared at me. Then she turned abruptly to Frank, grabbed her things, and headed for the exit. He followed her, glancing back over his shoulder at Rhiannon. She settled gracefully into a deck chair and closed her eyes. I heard her mutter, "Mission accomplished." While we were there, only one unpleasant incident occurred. As we were about to leave, I looked up and saw Penny walking toward me. Oh, damn, I thought. I completely forgot that Penny's women's team was playing today. What am I going to say to her? Hi, Michael. So nice to see you out again. Maybe we can meet up and play some more. She stopped abruptly when Rhiannon stood up and grabbed my arm. Oh, Penny said, surprised. Who's that? This is Rhiannon, my friend, I replied awkwardly. Penny blinked and stared at Rhiannon for a moment. Then she held out her hand. I'm Penny, she said. Nice to meet you. She turned back to me. I need to clean myself up. I'm all dirty from the game. See you later, Michael. She turned and ran away before I had a chance to reply. Who was that? Rhiannon asked curiously. That's Penny Pennington, I replied. She's my mixed doubles partner. Interesting, she replied. I mentally berated myself for not thinking ahead about how to deal with Penny. I didn't want to risk revealing my plan, but I also didn't want Penny to misunderstand me. Damn. Shortly after that, Rhiannon and I decided to end the conversation. I felt like we had done everything we wanted to do that day. As we left the pool, I felt like the level of conversation had risen noticeably. When we got back to my apartment, I let Rhiannon take a shower while I dried off and reflected on the day. Except for the unexpected encounter with Penny, everything had gone better than I had hoped. I had shown Melanie that I wasn't going to sit around mourning her departure for the rest of my life. What's more, I showed her that not only could I replace her, but I had also grown a lot myself. Let her think about that, I thought triumphantly. Well, how did it go? I heard a voice behind me. Turning around, I saw Rhiannon wrapped in a bath towel. You were magnificent, I replied enthusiastically. You were everything I hoped for, and even better. Want to celebrate? She asked. For a moment, I froze, unable to breathe. She was simply perfect. I gasped and realized I had been holding my breath. Gathering my strength, I walked over to her, bent down, and handed her the towel she had dropped. I'm sorry, Rhiannon. Now's not the right time. She smiled. Okay, I was just asking. She threw the towel over her shoulder and walked away from me. When she returned, her things were already packed. I handed her the sealed envelope. Thank you, I said. Today was exactly what I wanted. She tilted her head again in a playful manner and looked at me. Do you want to go back to Melanie? She asked suddenly. I flinched. No, I replied firmly. This wasn't a one-time mistake in judgment or a loss of control. She deliberately discarded me like a piece of trash. There's no way I'd take her back. I thought so, she said, but I just wanted to ask. Anyway, are we still on for next week? Oh, sure, I said, smiling broadly. Throughout the week, I made sure not to miss any practices at the club. I wanted everyone to know that I wasn't hiding anymore. Glad to have you back on the field, our team captain said to me. My teammates greeted me with pats on the back and big winks. Behind me, I heard someone say, "Lucky guy." I smiled. I knew the impression Rhiannon could make. A couple of days later, I returned to mixed doubles practice, but Penny was nowhere to be found. Our captain said she was sick. When I got home after practice, I called her right away. Are you okay, Penny? I asked. It's not like you to get sick. Oh, it's nothing serious, probably just a cold. Is there anything I can bring you? I asked. I'd love for you to bring something. No, she replied sharply. I mean, thanks, but I don't need anything. Anyway, you shouldn't come over. I don't want you to catch whatever I have. Well, okay, I said uncertainly. But if you feel worse, call me right away. I'm worried about you. She gave me a vague promise and then said she needed to rest, and I let her go. I was upset. Penny had always been so healthy and energetic that it alarmed me to think something might be wrong with her. And our little skirmish in the pool last Saturday probably didn't help, I thought. I still couldn't bring myself to tell her about my honey trap, afraid of ruining everything, but I just didn't want Penny to misunderstand me. I hope she'll forgive me when this is all over, I thought. The next step in my plan was scheduled for that weekend. There was going to be a dinner at the club, and Rhiannon and I were planning to perform. When she pulled up to my house, she was dressed completely differently from the last time we went out. Wow, you look like you just stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine, I said, looking at her. She was wearing a casual outfit consisting of a skirt, a light jacket, and a blouse. But although it all looked casual, the fabrics, styles, and accessories screamed high fashion. She curtsied like a little girl. Thank you, sweet sir. Actually, it's from Nordstrom's, she said. But don't worry if you don't know the brand. My main target today is women, and one woman in particular. Well, I can't vouch for the women, but I think you'll have a big impact on the men anyway, I replied sincerely. When we pulled into the parking lot in front of the club, Rhiannon turned to me and said, "We need to change tactics a little tonight. We need to split up and mingle with everyone here. That will allow me to do what I need to do." "I like that," I replied. When we stepped out onto the terrace where the dinner was being held, I immediately realized that we were both right. Again, most of the men were openly staring at Rhiannon. The wives were a little more reserved, but even from them I heard more than a few comments about Rhiannon's outfit that evening. Some of the more daring women asked where she had found her clothes, and soon Rhiannon was happily exchanging shopping tips with them. After chatting for a while, we returned to our meal. "Any luck?" I asked quietly. "Oh, I've been very busy," she replied seriously. "I've learned a lot about what the wives think about the situation with you, Melanie, and Frank. More importantly, I've made your ex's life miserable. I also flirted quite heavily with her fiancé, and she didn't like that one bit." I just smiled. It was obvious that Rhiannon knew exactly which buttons to push. I was talking to one of my teammates when Melanie walked by and pointed at me. I was curious, so I followed her to find out what she wanted. When she turned to me, I saw that her face was red with anger. "Looks like you're not wasting any time getting back into the dating game," she said grimly. "I didn't know there was a mandatory waiting period," I replied sarcastically. "Really? Well, I don't think you know about that, Michael. Where the hell did you find her?" "I never met her when we were married." "I met her at work," I replied simply. "I'd be careful if I were you. She seems too good for you." I couldn't help myself. "You're wrong, Melanie. I practice with her every chance I get." "Really?" she asked eagerly. "Then you'd better keep her away from Frank." With that, she left. I smiled to myself. Everything was going exactly as I had hoped. At that moment, I saw Penny carrying a tray of food. I knew she was on the entertainment committee, but I didn't know if she would be able to come today. I hurried over to her and took her hand. When she saw me, she blushed. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," I told her. "You should have called me and told me you were feeling well enough to come tonight." "I wasn't sure until the last minute, Michael. Besides, I thought you'd be here with your new girlfriend and I didn't want to intrude." At that moment, Rhiannon walked by, laughing and talking to one of my teammates. "And as I can see, I was right," Penny continued, frowning. She started to walk away, but I grabbed her hand again. "Wait, Penny. We need to talk about the next game." She hesitated, but seemed to make up her mind. "Michael, I've had a lot going on lately, so I've decided to quit mixed doubles and focus on the women's team." I was shocked. "You can't do that, Penny," I whispered. "You're my partner. Who am I going to play with?" Penny glanced back at me over her shoulder, and when I turned, I saw Rhiannon standing there. "You'll find someone, Michael," Penny said. "Now please let go of me. I need to clear my food." When I let go of her hand, she hurried away. Rhiannon took me by the hand and led me to an empty table. When we sat down, she leaned toward me and whispered, "Just so you know, that girl has a crush on you." "What?" "No, that's crazy. She's my tennis partner. She used to go to Pilates with Melanie." "And if I'm not mistaken," Rhiannon continued, ignoring me, "you're a little in love with her too." "No," I protested. "You're wrong. She's just a good friend." "Maybe," she replied skeptically. "Anyway, I think we've done all we can for today, so let's get out of here." When we got back to my place, I asked Rhiannon to tell me what had happened with Melanie and Frank. She smiled smugly. I went over to the table where the food was, tasted it, and made a few flattering remarks. Melanie was clearly uncomfortable with me being there, but she couldn't say anything. Then I told her how much I liked her outfit, and she had to respond with a compliment. That gave me an opportunity to tell her where I bought it. I could tell she recognized the outfit and guessed how much it must have cost. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were almost green with envy. "That sounds like Melanie," I said. "She's definitely into fashion and proud of her taste in clothes." Just then, Rhiannon continued, one of the other ladies asked Melanie to help her in the kitchen, and although she didn't want to, she had to leave me alone with Frank. As soon as she left, I went over and tried another bite of their dish. As she said this, Rhiannon repeated her actions. She straightened up and smiled, clearly aware of the impression she had made on me. As soon as I had Frank's attention, I started flirting with him seriously. I asked him if he played soccer, which gave him a chance to brag a little. I commented on how much bigger he was than you and said I liked big men. "Wow," I said. "No wonder Melanie was so hostile." I do what I can, she said with obvious false modesty. And I can't believe Frank fell for your flirting, I added. She grinned. Guys like Frank are so self-sufficient that it never occurs to them to question a woman's interest. Oddly enough, they're usually the worst lovers. I smiled. If Rhiannon's words were true, it would be good for Melanie. I handed her the envelope. Do you think we're ready for the next step? I asked her. Asked her. Asked her. Absolutely. Dancing at your club would be perfect for what we have planned. Then she turned and headed for the front door. What, you're not going to try to seduce me tonight? I asked with a smile. She grinned over her shoulder. I don't think so. Then she turned and swayed her hips slightly, making my groin twitch. When she left, I opened a can of beer and sat down to think about what had happened. On the one hand, I was very glad that the honey trap had worked. Although Melanie no longer wanted me, I knew she wasn't too happy about how quickly I had found a replacement for her, and even more upset that her replacement was much sexier than Melanie would ever be. It was all very enjoyable, but I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt about what had happened to Penny. Maybe Rhiannon was right, I thought. Maybe I do have feelings for Penny? I had liked her from the first time Melanie introduced us. I found her attractive, slim, athletic, graceful, with an interesting, outgoing personality. But because of Melanie, I had always tried to keep our relationship strictly platonic, like at the tennis club. And I was sure that it was what Penny wanted too, especially now that she was grieving the loss of her husband. I thought about what Rhiannon had said about Penny. It couldn't be true, could it? If Penny was interested in me, why was she avoiding me like the plague? And why did it bother me so much, and why was I constantly rejecting the most attractive woman I had probably ever met in my life? Could my feelings for Penny have something to do with it? In the end, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't know the answers to my questions, and even if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with them. I decided that the best thing I could do was to stay the course and focus on the plan I had made. The annual spring dance at the club was a popular event that always drew a large crowd. The ladies used the dance as an excuse to dress up, and the men reluctantly donned sports coats and some even ties. I was hoping that Frank and Marlene would come. I warned Rhiannon what to expect, and I was curious to see what she would wear for our evening out. So I was surprised and disappointed when she got out of the car wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I must have given myself away with my expression because she stroked my cheek as she passed. You didn't think I'd risk my dress coming here, did you? Let me just change in your bedroom and I'll be ready. I had already put on a sports jacket and slacks, so I paced impatiently around the room while she got dressed. Damn, I smiled to myself. It's like we're an old married couple. A few minutes later, I heard her voice. Michael, could you come in? I need your help. I went back into the house and opened the bedroom door. Oh my God. Rhiannon was standing there in the most beautiful lingerie I had ever seen. She turned back to me. Can I? She asked with a slight smile. I couldn't help myself and took a step toward her. But she stopped me with a smile and a raised hand. No, not now. I can't let you ruin this. Now that I have your approval, get out of here and let me get dressed. I staggered back to my study. A few minutes later, she came out. I swallowed hard. I think you could cause a few heart attacks today, I told her. And I wasn't kidding. She just smiled at me and held out her hand for me to walk her to the door. The club patio had been cleared for dancing, and paper lanterns hung overhead. It was a little garish, but I liked the effect of the soft light and the ringing music. Rhiannon slipped into my arms to dance, and I wasn't surprised to find that she was a much better dancer than I was. As we moved to the beat, she leaned her head against my shoulder, and in that moment, I decided I didn't care if she was a girl of easy virtue. I was just enjoying the feel of her body next to mine and her company. She lifted her head and pulled away just enough to look at me. You know, life in the suburbs isn't so bad. A girl could get used to it. Before I could answer, she tensed up. Oh, the battle stations. I turned around and saw Frank Calhoun walking toward us, dragging Melanie, who clearly didn't want to go. Hi, Rhiannon. Hi, Michael, he muttered. I'm so glad you decided to join us tonight. Would you like to switch partners for a couple of dances? When I agreed, he swept Rhiannon away, leaving me and a clearly embarrassed Melanie standing there. I held out my arms to her. Would you like to dance for old time's sake? She reluctantly agreed, and when the new song started, I began to dance with her. It was an interesting experience. I had loved this woman and been married to her for 10 years. But after everything that had happened, All I felt was a burning desire to make her feel what she had done to me. So our marriage was really that bad? I asked. I asked. She sighed. No, Michael, it wasn't like that. We had some good years and some good moments. But then things went wrong, and after a while I wasn't really excited about our relationship anymore. When Frank came along and made it clear how much he wanted me, I just fell in love. I really fell in love, Michael. It was just like in college. She looked at me. I didn't want to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what I thought was right. Do you understand? I understand, I replied bitterly. You decided to change partners. That's not what I meant, she said, trying to explain. It's okay, I said. I've changed partners too. She grimaced, remembering who I was dating now, and I felt a little satisfied. If everything went well, things would only get better. I looked up and saw Frank and Rhiannon walking toward us arm in arm. Your girlfriend's back, Michael, Frank said with a slight smirk. Have a good evening. Then he left, and Melanie tried her best to catch up with him. Rhiannon and I continued dancing. How did it go? I whispered in her ear. I could hear her giggling. He's hooked, she replied. He's sure I'm in love with him. He'll make up some excuse for Melanie, and we'll meet at the club when everyone else leaves. I'm a little nervous about my part. The timing has to be perfect, I told her. Leave it to me. Women know all about these things. Then she licked my ear and I shuddered helplessly. When night fell, I noticed that people were leaving quickly. I must have been looking around because Rhiannon spotted me. Sorry, Michael, she said. Looks like Penny isn't coming tonight. Am I that transparent? I asked her. Like glass, she replied with a slight smile. As we walked back to my house, I took another envelope out of my pocket and handed it to Rhiannon. I may not have a chance to give this to you later, I told her, and I wanted to make sure you got it properly. She took it, almost reluctantly it seemed to me. For a moment she stared at me, and then her face changed. The goddess somehow disappeared, and only a real, though still beautiful woman remained. This was the most unusual assignment I've ever had, she said, and you're unlike any of my other clients. It was a little uncomfortable at times, I blushed, but I really enjoyed it. I took her by both hands. When I decided to take revenge, I knew I needed someone with outstanding qualities, I replied. But I didn't expect to find someone like you, and I'll never forget you. Then she glanced at the jeweled watch on her wrist and added, It's almost time we have to go. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With that, she walked out the door, got into her car, and drove away. I stood there for a minute, then made up my mind. Rhiannon and I hadn't talked about this, and I hoped I wasn't going to ruin everything, but I had to take a chance. I took out my cell phone. She must have recognized my number. Michael, why are you calling at this hour? Penny, I want to ask you for a favor that will be the most important thing in my life. Please don't ask any questions. Just meet me at the club in 30 minutes. What's going on, Michael? What does this mean? Please, Penny, I begged. I don't have time to explain. Just trust me. Come to the club in 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I have to go. I hung up. On my way to the club, I wondered if she would show up. The chances were slim, but I decided it was my only chance. When I arrived at the parking lot, there were 2 cars there. I took out my cell phone again and called. Frank? Melanie's angry voice came on the line. Where are you? This isn't Frank, I said. It's Michael. Michael, what do you want and why are you calling so late? She asked. I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He's with Rhiannon. What? She screamed. Where are they? Listen, I said. Just meet me at the club as soon as you can. Then I hung up. Frank's house was a few blocks away from the club, but she must have been running fast because I soon spotted her running across someone's backyard. I caught up with her before she reached the club. Where is he? She shouted. Shut up, I ordered, grabbing her by the wrist. You have to be quiet so we can catch them. I led her to the club door, which was unlocked, and we tiptoed inside. As we entered, there was a rustling of clothes. In the dim light coming through the windows, I saw Melanie's eyes widen. I quickly covered her mouth with my hand to keep her from screaming, then pointed to the light switch on the wall. She nodded in understanding, and we tiptoed over to it. I pressed the switch, and the room was instantly filled with light. Frank tried to jump up with a startled cry, but his pants caught on his knees, and he stumbled and fell to the floor. He jumped back to his feet, frantically pulling up his pants. Behind him, Rhiannon rose from the sofa where she had been lying. I had to hold Melanie back as she started screaming at Frank. You bastard! How could you do this to me? We were supposed to get married. Rhiannon clung to Frank's arm, pressing herself against his back under the pressure of Melanie's anger. Now that he had his pants on, Frank regained his confidence. He looked boldly at me, then turned to Rhiannon and asked, "What do you want to do now, baby?" "Oh, Frank," she replied in a girlish voice, "I just want to be with you." She clung tightly to him, and he embraced her protectively. Then he turned back to us. Despite Melanie's desperation, his first words were directed at me. "Well, Michael, it looks like you've lost another woman." I didn't say a word, but Melanie exclaimed, "What about us, Frank? What about us?" The big man turned to her. "Listen, Melanie, we had a good thing going for a while, but it's not going to last. I've found someone better and I'm going to devote all my time to her." He looked at Rhiannon, then turned back to Melanie. "You can't blame a man for wanting to change women, can you?" Even though she was hurt and angry, Melanie couldn't help but glance at me guiltily when she heard those words. Rhiannon turned and deftly put on her dress. Then she turned and hugged Frank around the neck. He leaned down and kissed her. "Let's go, baby. Let's get out of here," he said, pulling her toward the door. "Go, Frank," she said. "I have to tell Michael something. Besides, I don't want to leave my car here. Listen, I'll meet you at that bar." She reached into her purse, pulled out a piece of paper, and quickly wrote down an address. "I'll be there soon, honey," she added, stroking his pants and kissing him passionately. He looked at her doubtfully. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" he asked. "I'm sure, honey. Michael won't touch me. He's not like that." "Yes, you're probably right." Frank smiled and left the house. We heard him drive away. While all our attention was focused on Frank, Melanie managed to break free from my grip. She screamed, "Bitch!" and lunged at Rhiannon with her claws out. Instead of backing away, Rhiannon stood her ground. When Melanie reached her, Rhiannon quickly stepped to the side, grabbed one of Melanie's outstretched arms, and deftly twisted it behind her back. She winked at me. I knew those self-defense lessons would come in handy. As Melanie continued to struggle, Rhiannon said sharply, "If you don't calm down, I'll dislocate your shoulder." Melanie stopped struggling, and Rhiannon pushed her away so she was facing her. "Listen, Melanie, there are a few things you need to know," she said. "I don't care about your Neanderthal ex-fiancé, and I have no intention of joining him at the bar he's heading to." Melanie was stunned. But, but why? Why did I seduce him? Because it's my job. I'm a paid escort. I've had dozens of guys like Frank. They all think they're God's gift to women and are always looking for their next victim. You think he loved you? The only thing he really loved was finally beating Michael at something. I'm sure he enjoyed entertaining you, but he enjoyed entertaining Michael even more. That's why Michael hired me, to get a little revenge on Frank and show you what it's like to have an unfaithful lover. "It hurts, doesn't it?" Melanie screamed and lunged at me. But before I could react, a figure flashed in front of me and knocked Melanie to the ground. She sprawled awkwardly on the floor. Penny stood over her, her fists clenched. "You deserve that, Melanie. After what you did to Michael, you deserve much worse." Melanie just lay there and cried. It seemed to me that her feelings were more hurt than her body. Penny turned to me, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "Is it true?" she asked. "She's really not your girlfriend?" "No," I replied solemnly. "She was my partner in the trap we set for Frank and Melanie, but nothing more." "But she's so beautiful," Penny objected. "I could never compete with her." Rhiannon came over and put her hands on Penny's shoulders. "Silly girl, I never had a chance. He only had eyes for you." Penny looked at me again. "So you never even—" Rhiannon interrupted again. "No, Penny, never. I couldn't distract him from you enough for him to touch me. And believe me, I gave him plenty of chances." Penny said nothing but looked at me with shining eyes. Rhiannon grinned at us both. "I have to go. I've had more challenging assignments, but I've had enough for one night." At that moment, Melanie got up from the floor. "What about me? Where am I supposed to go now? I can't go back to Frank after what happened." Penny looked at her thoughtfully. "I don't know what you're going to do tomorrow, but you can stay at my place tonight. I'll go home with Michael." With that, she kissed me firmly. I took her hand and decided not to let go. But something bothered me, and I turned back to Rhiannon. "What about Frank? Where did you send him?" She laughed. "That's the address of a bar he knows. I wonder how long he'll stay there before he realizes I'm not coming." Then the smile disappeared from her face, and she looked at me intently. "Good luck, Michael. You're a special person, and I won't forget you." She leaned over and kissed me gently. I felt Penny squeeze my hand even tighter. Then Rhiannon turned to Penny, and her face took on a stern expression. You'll be good to him, you understand? If I hear that you're not, I'll come back, and this time I won't take no for an answer. The stern expression disappeared from her face, and I realized it had been one of sadness. She reached out and stroked my cheek. But I don't think I'll be that lucky. Then she reached into her purse and slipped something into my hand. Goodbye, she said, turned and left the room. I looked at my hand. There were 4 unopened envelopes. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, subscribe to the channel and watch the next video.